Duvall is best known for her roles in The Shining and for working on several films.
The Stanley Kubrick-directed horror offering remains a classic to this day.
For decades, The Shining has terrified, fascinated, and puzzled audiences. But Shelley Duvall just dropped a revelation that changes everything. Fans thought they'd dissected every frame of Kubrick's masterpiece, but it turns out they missed one chilling detail that was hiding in plain sight. What if the key to understanding the film's darkest secrets was in Shelley's performance all along? Could her quiet choices on screen, long dismissed or misunderstood, actually be the thread that holds the entire nightmare together? In this video, we'll reveal what Shelley Duvall finally shared after years of silence, backed by rare interviews, set reports, and insider accounts. Get ready to see The Shining in a way you never have before. The role that broke her. When Shelley Duvall was cast as Wendy Torrance in The Shining, many questioned the choice. Shelley wasn't the typical Hollywood starlet. She wasn't known for playing victims or damsels in distress. She was quirky, thoughtful, and often cast in offbeat, artistic roles that highlighted her unique presence. But Stanley Kubrick, a director infamous for his precision and perfectionism, saw something in Shelley that others didn't. He didn't want a traditional scream queen. He wanted someone real, someone whose fear wouldn't look like acting. What Shelley didn't know when she accepted the part was that this role would become the most demanding, punishing experience of her career, and one that would haunt her for decades. From the moment filming began, Kubrick made it clear that his vision for Wendy was unlike anything audiences had seen before. He wanted her terror to feel raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. But rather than coax that out through gentle direction, Kubrick chose a far harsher path. He isolated Shelley on set. He had the crew instructed not to comfort or support her during filming. He demanded take after take, sometimes over 100, for emotionally grueling scenes, pushing her to the edge of exhaustion. In the infamous baseball bat scene, where Wendy backs away from Jack as he advances on her in a terrifying rage, Kubrick shot the sequence 127 times. From May until October, I was really in and out of ill health because the stress of the role was so great. Stanley pushed me and prodded me further than I've ever been pushed before. It was almost unbearable, Shelley once said. Shelley's hands were blistered, her voice hoarse from screaming, her body and mind completely drained, and yet Kubrick pressed on, convinced that only through this ordeal could true fear be captured on film. Though it looks like there was a director committed to total authenticity, to Shelley, it was psychological warfare. She remained tight with anxiety on set and off. The stress triggered serious hair loss. It kept her awake. Yet she delivered a timeless performance, layered and real enough for the audiences to feel Wendy's horror as if it were their own. For me, it was just tumultuous. I had to cry and hyperventilate and carry a little boy and run for most of the time we shot. And that was about a year, a little over a year. What so many fans fail to appreciate is just how much of that terror Shelley felt was real. She was not just acting in fear. She was afraid. And Kubrick took full advantage of that. But here's the most amazing thing about it. Shelley went through all the emotional agony, yet Kubrick could not break her as an artist. She made very subtle, carefully considered events that most viewers never noticed under the panic and exhaustion. She built up Wendy's fear with the strength and will of a mother, rather than just a victim. Shelley didn't use her mannerisms like twitching hands, wild eyes, and wavering voice as terror signs, but used them conveniently for a woman still somewhat together, but rebelling against breaking. Shelley later relayed how she kept thinking about the inner world of Wendy, even when she had filmed the very lowest point of her experiences. She wasn't just acting up to Kubrick's harshness. She was actually shaping character from within. Over the years that followed, the tale of Kubrick's methods and Nicholson's fiery interpretation of Jack Torrance overshadowed Shelley as a performer. Critics dismissed Wendy as either weak or shrill, but failed to catch the intense emotional layering Shelley brought to the role. When time passed and Shelley finally opened up about what she had lived through on that set, critics and fans began re-examining her performance. What they found was a performance of extraordinary depth, one that anchored the horror of the film in something real and devastating. But what Shelley quietly wove into her performance has only recently come to light, and it might just be the film's hidden masterpiece. The quiet genius behind the terror. When most people think of The Shining, they picture the chaos, Jack's wild-eyed rants, the swinging axe, the blood flooding the hallways. But what keeps that chaos grounded, what gives the film its true horror, is Shelley Duvall's quiet genius. What do you want to talk about? Shelley acting? Shelley's performance as Wendy Torrance isn't loud. It doesn't fight for attention. Instead, it simmers just beneath the surface, in the way she moves, the way she breathes, and the way she looks at Jack with a mix of terror, love, and disbelief. For decades, critics missed this. They called Wendy weak. They called her hysterical. But in truth, Shelley was doing something no one expected. She was creating a character so real that audiences mistook her for a woman on the verge of breaking. And that was the point. Shelley's acting choices weren't accidental. Even in the midst of Kubrick's relentless pressure, she was carefully building Wendy's emotional journey. She used subtle body language to show Wendy's fear creeping up long before Jack's descent into madness was fully visible. Watch closely, and you'll see it. The way Wendy flinches at Jack's sudden movements, the way her eyes dart around the room as if searching for an escape, even in moments of calm. The slight tremble in her voice grows scene by scene. These were not signs of weakness. They were signs of a woman trapped, aware of the danger, but trying desperately to hold it together for her child's sake. One of the biggest tricks Shelley used was in stillness. Eloquent and noiseless, she preferred to portray fear in film like this by scenes. Jack roars in anger or taunts her, and Wendy won't scream or howl in retaliation. She freezes, body stiff with dread, as her mind clearly races for a way to survive. Such stillness builds unbearable tension. The audiences expect her to react, fight back, but Shelley makes them sit in that uncomfortable space where terror paralyzes you. That kind of fear is real, the one that looks pitiful rather than celluloid. And it is this realism that makes Jack's rampaging violence hit so much harder. What was most remarkable, however, was Shelley's nuances in playing Wendy's maternal instinct. While Kubrick had paid the psychological horror the focus, Shelley made sure that Wendy's love for Danny always stood at the core of her character. Even at her most terrified, even as Jack's madness closes in, you see in Shelley's eyes that Wendy is thinking of Danny's safety above her own. The way she shields him, holds him, pulls him behind her. It's not just survival instinct, it's pure, raw love. Shelley later talked about keeping this thought alive in every scene. Wendy was not just a woman in danger, but a mother fighting in the only way she knows to protect her child from a nightmare she cannot fully comprehend. It is amazing how long this recognition actually took. For years, Shelley's careful choices were invisible to people, too subtle to earn praise, perhaps even bordering on hysterics rather than heroics. But with the hindsight now available to its fans and scholars, the Wendy of The Shining is sometimes being restudied, as are all things. They now see how Shelley's muted genius operated as the emotional heart of the film, the thread preventing horror from bypassing mere spectacle. The character is defined by its stillness, humility, and a tender voice. Everything that conferred upon Wendy Torrance's status as one of the genre's most multifaceted and believable characters. And there's one scene where Shelley's hidden brilliance flips the entire story on its head, and most fans never saw it coming. The scene fans never understood. For over 40 years, Fans have analyzed every frame of The Shining, looking for hidden meanings, secret messages, and symbols. But according to Shelley Duvall herself, there's one scene that holds the key to understanding Wendy Torrance, a scene that most fans completely misunderstood. Have you seen the film Groundhog Day? Well, that's what it was like. I had never done more than, say, 15 takes before in my life, so it was a great change for me to do so many. It isn't the famous baseball bat confrontation on the stairs, or even the terrifying moments when Wendy locks Jack in the pantry. The scene Shelley pointed to is quieter, easier to overlook. When I picked up those pages, I wasn't just frightened, I was heartbroken. That's the moment Wendy knows Jack is truly gone, Shelley said. It's the moment when Wendy first discovers Jack's typewritten pages, the ones that repeat the chilling phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." A deceptively easy sequence. Wendy flips through pages, and a dawning horror settles in as she realizes Jack's mind has completely come apart. But Shelley divulged that this was the moment Wendy's entire inner world turned around, the place where her love for Jack collided with the irrepressible reality that he was no longer the man she married. Shelley also stated that she played this scene not out of fear, but heartbreak. The trembling hands, the widening eyes, the gasps. They were not just manifestations of fright. They were endpoints of Wendy lamenting the loss of Jack in the present time. It was the point in time during which she finally let go of the hope that he could ever be saved. Many missed the tragic weight Shelley added to her subtly understated performance in the scene. Most viewers focused on Jack's descent, on the horror of the repeated phrase. But take another look at Wendy. In her expression, you can see her world shatter. She is not only seeing madness in the lines printed on the page, she is seeing the end of her marriage, the collapse of the family she has fought to keep together. Shelley later explained that this scene was the real turning point for Wendy. No longer would Wendy try to reason with Jack. In that moment, Wendy is in strict survival mode, knowing the man she loved is gone. What a powerful revelation the character of Shelley presents, claiming the entire reconfiguration of the story. Fans long assumed that the horror began with Jack's physical assault, that is, when he began to swing the axe or threaten Danny. Yet instead, the moment deemed terrifying for the viewer by Shelley occurred for Wendy, after Jack's chilling words were laid down. It's not the violence that slays, it's the painful loss of the man she thought she knew. That is what gives her fear credibility. She's not scared just for her life. She has to grieve the loss of her family, all the while fighting to stay alive. This scene brings out Shelley's marvelous ability to convey much using little. She doesn't scream or fall apart immediately, letting the realization set in gradually, encompassing every flicker of heartbreak on her face. Her breathing begins to change, and her posture is slowly enveloped by the weight of the burden she carries. Her hands seem to nervously fumble with the pages of that terrible book, still holding on to the hope that she misread it. Hope fades with every added page. Shelley rendered Wendy's reaction human enough and not exaggerated for the camera, a painfully genuine response. And thus, the scene becomes haunting once you see it for what it truly is. For decades, this moment was overshadowed by the film's more explosive scenes, but Shelley's quiet heartbreak is what gives The Shining its soul. It's the emotional center that grounds the film's supernatural horror in something deeply relatable, the fear of losing the ones we love to forces we can't control. But behind the scenes, Shelley's quiet defiance in protecting this performance came at a cost few people ever knew. Shelley's battle with Kubrick. Behind The Shining's haunting atmosphere and iconic scenes was a brutal reality that Shelley Duvall faced every single day of filming. While audiences were gripped by the terror playing out on screen, few knew that the real horror was unfolding behind the scenes. Shelley wasn't just acting, she was surviving. Stanley had no compassion for me. He was a great director in many ways, But he didn't sympathize. He pushed and pushed, and it left deep wounds, Shelley said. Stanley Kubrick's reputation for perfectionism is legendary, but on the set of The Shining, that perfectionism morphed into relentless psychological pressure directed at Shelley alone. I mean, he was a completely different director with Shelley. While Jack Nicholson was often praised and protected during production, Shelley became the target of Kubrick's obsession with authenticity at any cost. What started as direction became a calculated campaign of isolation and manipulation designed to break her down emotionally. Kubrick's tactics weren't subtle. He instructed crew members not to offer Shelley comfort or support, no matter how distressed she became. He berated her in front of others, questioned her abilities, and demanded an impossible number of takes for emotionally exhausting scenes. Simple moments, like Wendy backing away from Jack, were shot over 100 times until Shelley was physically and emotionally shattered. Her hair began falling out from the stress. Her health deteriorated, and yet, day after day, she showed up, determined to protect the character she had built. In interviews years later, Shelley admitted that the experience left lasting scars, but also revealed something many fans never realized. She fought to preserve Wendy's dignity, even as Kubrick tried to strip it away. What made Shelley's battle so amazing was that Kubrick's cruelty never actually prevailed over her artistic vision. She was crying from endless takes and being humiliated in public, yet she fought to portray Wendy not as a weak victim, but as a woman barely holding on and surviving the unconceivable horror. Shelley purposely added strength and conviction to Wendy, choices that Kubrick never made, but that she insisted upon. Scenes where Wendy shielded Danny or gathered the courage to retaliate against Jack were all Wendy's choices. She fought to show that in between the brush of Wendy's fear was a mother's fierce determination and a woman's will to protect all that she could. The emotional toll behind this conflict was monumental. According to Shelley, she felt entrapped both in the role and on the set amid Kubrick's psychological warfare. In her words, she dreaded every morning, knowing another day would unfold, harried by emotional turmoil. The entire time, she held on to the character she had built. She kept Wendy from being pigeonholed into a stereotype even when the director himself seemed bent on doing that. This staunch resistance on Shelley's part became one of the most potent forces of the film, though few realized it at the time. As more details regarding the production have come out today, fans and critics have started to reconsider Shelley's performance, and with it, her resilience. What was formerly labeled as hysteria is being redefined as a densely layered interpretation of trauma, fear, and courage. Shelley didn't just survive the ordeal at the hands of Kubrick. She added heart to her performance in The Shining. Threat and horror would have seemed hollow without her quiet act of defiance. Instead, Shelley rooted the nightmare in something agonizingly human, the tale of a woman fighting to save herself and her child from annihilation. And after all those years of silence, Shelley finally revealed the secret she hid within that performance. And it changes everything. The secret she finally shared. For decades, fans of The Shining debated Shelley Duvall's performance, dissecting every scream, every tear, every trembling moment on screen. After you do a certain number, it sort of goes dead, and then 5 more takes or so, and it revives itself, and by then you know the scene like the back of your hand, and you can make no mistakes with it, and you forget all reality other than what you're doing, acting. Many saw Wendy Torrance as a symbol of terror, someone consumed by fear, broken by the nightmare unfolding around her. But in a rare interview years later, Shelley finally revealed a truth that most viewers never realized. What she played wasn't just fear. Beneath the surface, hidden in the smallest gestures and quietest moments, Shelley had layered Wendy with something far more complex, something no one had asked her to include. and few had ever noticed. She played Wendy with a deep undercurrent of guilt. Shelley explained that as she built Wendy's character, she imagined a woman who, on some level, blamed herself for the family's collapse. Wendy wasn't just reacting to Jack's madness. She was haunted by the idea that she had ignored the warning signs, that she had stayed too long, that she had put Danny in harm's way by trying to keep the family together. This hidden guilt shaped every choice Shelley made on screen. The glances down at the floor, the hesitation before speaking, the way Wendy clings to Danny not just out of fear, but as if trying to protect him from a danger she feels responsible for unleashing. Shelley said that playing Wendy this way made her heartbreak real and made her terror personal. The seemingly invisible thread of guilt changes one's perception of Wendy throughout the film. In the scene where Jack accuses Wendy of ruining his life, you don't see her matching him word for word. Her face crumples, not in simple fear, but in deep sorrow, as if she actually entertains a moment when she thinks he may be right. When she goes further back with the baseball bat, she is doing more than protecting herself. She mourns for the man Jack once was, for who he may become. It was Shelley who said that these moments weren't prompted by Kubrick. They come out of her own experience. This hidden layer of guilt also accounts for why Wendy stays for as long as she does. Why doesn't she leave earlier? Why does she keep trying to reason with Jack when it is clear that it is really one Mad Hatter communion he has gone to? Shelley says, because Wendy feels guilty. She hopes against hope longer than she should, because she cannot bear the idea of giving up on Jack. She wants to believe there may be something worth saving, that perhaps she might somehow repair what is damaged. So when she does ward off Jack, locking him in the pantry, defending Danny with the knife, the instinct is not for her survival alone. At that moment, Wendy forgives herself and acknowledges that saving her child allows her to let Jack go. Shelley's quiet revelation gives tremendous depth to her performance. For many, it was the synonym of hysteria when actually it was a picture of a woman tormented by love, guilt, and survival instincts. In view of their subtlety, so rooted in genuine human emotion, it's easy to see why her choices went unnoticed at the start. And that was Shelley. She did not act out Wendy's terror, she lived it, adding layers of invisible truths that are only just coming to life. And though this secret gave The Shining its emotional power, it came at a devastating cost Shelley would carry for years to come. The cost of genius. Shelley Duvall's quiet brilliance in The Shining gave the film its emotional core. Her layered, deeply human portrayal of Wendy Torrance is part of what makes the movie endure as a masterpiece of psychological horror. But what few realized at the time, what even Shelley herself didn't fully grasp until years later, was the devastating personal cost of that genius. It was extremely difficult. He demanded realism, so I had to really cry for 9 months out of the year, and 1 month that I was in London to do the film. Behind the camera, beneath the surface of her carefully crafted performance, Shelley was breaking. The demands of the role, the constant emotional battering, and the isolation Kubrick imposed on her left scars that didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. While the world marveled at the terror Shelley brought to the screen, she was quietly grappling with a private nightmare no one saw. For Shelley, the line between acting and reality blurred dangerously on the set of The Shining. The endless takes, the deliberate psychological pressure, and the emotional manipulation wore her down day by day. She described waking up each morning filled with dread, knowing she faced another day of relentless filming where she would be expected to cry, scream, and crumble on cue, again and again. Shelley later said that the experience drained her not just as an actress, but as a person. The stress took a physical toll. She became ill, her hair thinned from anxiety, and she lost weight. But even more lasting was the emotional toll. One of the cringiest aspects of Shelley's story is how long it was before most people recognized her work as a masterpiece. The moment The Shining was released, critics were raving about Nicholson's just plain wicked performance and Kubrick's painstaking directorship. Shelley, however, was often dismissed as melodramatic or hysterical. Few saw the subtlety of choice and emotional layers that she had woven into Wendy. Very few saw that what appeared to them like sheer hysteria was actually an honest portrayal of trauma. Even after a number of years in which Shelley came out of the shadows of what she went through, fans and film historians were finally able to reconsider it. Some have suggested that Shelley's performance of a very essay-like Wendy offers one of the most complex and honest portrayals of fear in film. By that very veracity was the mark forever stamped in that cruel way upon Shelley's spirit. Even after the shooting was finished, she went into seclusion, far from the Hollywood limelight. The conditions under which she lived after that would be defined by deeply engraved scars from Kubrick's treatment and lack of appreciation by the industry. She acted only to refuse to go through another of such an excruciatingly grueling and damaging ordeal, like The Shining, ever again. Only now, decades later, can the faintest traces of her handiwork be seen festooning the unremarked corners of the picture. It was never a loud thing to behold. It was ostentatiously quiet, an eye, a withdrawal, a barely there word. In those tense silences lies the same genius for which she is truly famous, the very genius that gave life to the memory of The Shining and equally dealt a heavy dose of suffering, pain, and agony, the depths of which we are merely starting to measure. But through it all, Shelley's hidden brilliance left a legacy that changed horror forever, and fans are only now beginning to see how deeply she shaped the genre. The legacy fans never saw. Shelley Duvall's portrayal of Wendy Torrance in The Shining was once dismissed, misunderstood, or overshadowed. Someone else is in the hotel with us. I'm very pleased to have done it, because I've learned more from that picture and strengthened myself and broadened the scale that my emotions can reach. But in the years since the film's release, as fans, critics, and filmmakers revisited her performance, a powerful truth emerged. Shelley Duvall quietly redefined what a horror heroine could be. Her Wendy wasn't the standard victim or scream Queen Hollywood so often leaned on. She was raw, vulnerable, human, and because of that, unforgettable. Wendy wasn't just reacting to Jack's madness or the Overlook Hotel's dark forces. She embodied the emotional reality of being trapped in a waking nightmare, fighting for her child's safety while trying not to lose herself. And that quiet, authentic terror has since become a blueprint for modern horror heroines. Directors and actors alike have cited Shelley's work as a masterclass in emotional depth. Today's genre films feature women who are complex, layered, and real in their fear and resilience, and many of those portrayals can be traced back to Wendy Torrance. Films like Hereditary, The Babadook, and The Witch feature mothers struggling against forces beyond their control, much like Wendy, and those characters owe a debt to Shelley's groundbreaking work. In interviews, filmmakers have pointed to Shelley's ability to make the audience feel what Wendy feels, the confusion, the dread, the heartbreak, as the gold standard for psychological horror. Shelley's performance affected not just the genre, but also the audience's very approach to engaging with horror films. Instead of centering on the villain or the monster, the audience became even more attuned to the emotional journey of the survivors. Wendy Torrance became not only an observer of the breakdown of Jack, but also the emotional conduit through which an audience experienced The Shining's terror. Without her, it would have felt that the terror in the film was mere sound, and fury signifying nothing. A showcase of madness without even a hint of humanity to anchor or ground it. It is Wendy's despair, her sorrow, and ultimately her strength that delivers a blow to the gut that keeps the film alive and kicking. And that's a legacy that has only grown stronger. The influence of Shelley goes beyond the screen. Her confession later on in life and talk about other elements of her performance and personal toll ignited a huge discussion about the treatment of actors on set, especially in the context of heavy and emotionally charged roles. Her story, an inspiration and a warning, reminds everyone on the set that creating great art should never come at the price of the artist's welfare and respect for those performances that do not call for attention but linger long after the credits roll. There was a time when Shelley Duvall's Wendy was thought of as hysterical and an unwilling victim. Now she is known as one of horror's deeply human, deeply tragic survivors. For Shelley to have made these understated choices and protect emotional truths gives her a seat in the canon of cinema history, not as a footnote, but as a forerunner. And while the fans are rediscovering The Shining, they are also coming to realize that the film had always held its most potent, haunting magic within Shelley, within her eyes, her voice, and her understated battle for survival. If Shelley Duvall's hidden brilliance shocked you as much as it did us, like, comment, and subscribe for more untold truths behind legendary films. Drop your favorite Shelley moment in the comments. And don't miss the next video on screen that reveals even more shocking behind-the-scenes secrets.